James Hetfield knows what it's like to be burned alive on stage, literally. In August 1992, Metallica's frontman stepped into a 12-foot pyrotechnic flame in front of 55,000 fans and watched his arm and hand melt to the bone.
And Hetfield was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment.
17 days later, he was back on stage finishing his tour like nothing happened. That moment wasn't random, it was symbolic, because Hetfield's life has always been about confronting pain, from childhood trauma to global fame, from addiction to redemption. This is the story of a man who faced the fire and didn't flinch.
I'm gonna be happy right now. I want it now, because I feel like shit.
This is the story of James Hetfield. Born on August 3rd, 1963 in Downey, California, James Hetfield's rage has deep roots. He grew up the quiet son of strict Christian scientists in suburban California, feeling like a misfit thanks to his parents' extreme faith. Doctors and medicine were banned in the Hetfield house. Prayer was supposed to cure all.
The concept of Christian Science is you're using all of the God's power to heal you. You don't believe in doctors, you don't believe in dentists even, you don't believe in anything around health class or anything physical like that.
When young James got sick or injured, tough luck. God's will would handle it.
I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it or understand it.
He was an awkward kid, forbidden from normal school activities like health class and sports physicals. It's no surprise he felt alienated and angry at the world.
I realize now, when I look back, our family was pretty insulated, very closed off because of our religion.
And then came the real trauma. His father walked out when James was 13, and 3 years later, his mother died of cancer after refusing treatment due to her religion. The pain lit a fire inside him. By 16, he was living with his older half-brother, and as with most kids that age, listening to loud and aggressive music became his coping mechanism.
My family kind of disintegrated when I was a kid. You know, father left, mother passed away, I had to live with my brother, and then kind of just all, like the family, you know, where'd my stuff go? Where it just kind of floated away. I have two older half-brothers. They're like 10 and 11 and 12 years older than I. And both of them played. Chris played some guitar, and my brother Dave played drums in a band called The Bitter End. And so there was a drum kit at the house, there was other musical instruments, and then I roomed with Dave. He was going to college, so he'd be away a lot, and I just raid his record collection.
James was hooked on brutal, angry rock, you know, stuff like Black Sabbath and Motorhead.
Black Sabbath was the one that I really enjoyed the most.
He had a cheap guitar and a ton of anger. He played it like he was trying to break it. In November 1981, James spotted a classified ad. Drummer looking for other metal musicians to jam with. It was posted by Lars Ulrich, a loud, energetic kid from Denmark. James showed up and boom, instant chemistry.
James, is it true that your first impression of Lars was that he smelled awfully?
Is awfully a word?
Well, you smelled very European. You know, I wasn't used to any of that.
It was all new.
Dude grew up in LA, you know?
You guys were what, like 19 when you first looked up, started playing? Like 19?
I think it was 19, 18 or 19.
I was 18.
Like
18.
They were just two 18-year-old kids without a plan, but they had plenty of rage, riffs, and were obsessed with metal. Hetfield came from a broken home and played like it. Lars came from money and talked like he owned the room. On paper, they didn't belong in the same band, but metal doesn't care about backgrounds, and that's how Metallica was born. They didn't give a fuck about trends. While LA bands sprayed their hair and chased girls, these guys moved to San Francisco to join the underground metal scene. In 1982, the band solidified. Hetfield as the frontman, Ulrich on drums, Dave Mustaine on guitar, and Cliff Burton, a musician already treated like a local legend, on bass. Their early shows were brutal. The guitars were fast and claustrophobic, the drums a repeated kick to the balls, and Hetfield's voice hit like gravel in a blender.
My extent of singing was a yeah, like that at the end, you know. I'd do a little bump at the end. That's singing, you know, that's my vibrato or something, you know. And, slowly over time, you know, obviously being on tour and things, you just get better. The more you sing, you gotta develop a style.
Unlike the mainstream metal bands at the time, Metallica didn't care about sex appeal. They came to destroy. And so, one brutal set at a time, they built a following of kids who looked just like them, rough, angry, and tired of the fake shine of glam rock.
My dad, he came to some of the shows, and he was proud, but we still weren't really, to level 5 at all, whatsoever. We weren't at level 5. It was still on level 1, but he was proud that I had made something out of myself, out of a passion, out of some idea I had, and I was made fun of all the time. Okay, yeah, you're a rock and roller. You're gonna be on stage one day, huh? Total sarcasm from friends and family. And
Metallica lived like they played, fast, loud, and totally out of control. Booze was everywhere, and it wasn't long before the band earned the nickname Alcoholica. The early days were a blur of beer runs, late nights, and hangovers. Hetfield practically had a Jägermeister bottle glued to his hand. The irony is rich. In 1983, Metallica kicked out Dave Mustaine for excessive drinking and violent behavior, essentially firing him for being too drunk in a band of drunks.
The thing is we all were such drunks, and when I got drunk, I got violent. When they got drunk, they got stupid.
Mustaine was so wasted, he allegedly didn't even remember being sacked until he woke up on a bus back to LA. It sounds absurd, but that's how wild Metallica's early days were. They replaced him with guitarist Kirk Hammett and kept on thrashing.
Fucking adrenaline, motherfucker!
The thing that bothered me the most was I had all my music and I left it behind and I said, don't use my music. And of course they did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they used it on the first record. On the second record, there's parts of my music on a song on the third record. All the solos on the first record are mine, except that they're just performed by Kirk, and close, but not the same.
Even with a strong local following, Metallica couldn't land a record deal. So their manager, John Zazula, a Jersey metal junkie, started a label from scratch just to release their music. So, in May 1983, the band holed up in a studio in New York and recorded their debut album in 2 weeks. Kill 'Em All dropped on July 25th, 1983, and the metal scene was stunned. This wasn't shiny MTV-friendly rock. It was brutal, ugly, and violent.
Kill 'Em All is basically, the first, 10 songs that we wrote. We were pretty particular about, I remember very early on with James having, what's the point of writing a song if it's not good enough to go on the record? So we were very kind of anal. But every song, so Kill 'Em All is literally the first 10 songs. It's not, there was 16 and 10 of them made it on the record.
At first, critics didn't know what to make of Kill 'Em All. But word spread, fans showed up, and the album went triple platinum. The metal press crowned Metallica the future of metal. Then came Ride the Lightning, heavier, more mature, and unafraid to get deep. It proved Metallica wasn't just a one-album wonder. And by 1986, Master of Puppets had arrived, a masterpiece. The band was firing on all cylinders, playing packed arenas and releasing songs that went straight for the jugular, tackling themes like governmental control, wars, and addiction. They were unstoppable. Yet, life had a cruel surprise in store just when they tasted success. Picture this. Sweden, 1986. Metallica is on top of the world, touring Europe after the massive success of Master of Puppets, and things couldn't be bigger. Then disaster strikes.
And we were driving from Stockholm to Copenhagen, and we were all asleep in the bus, and all of a sudden we hit a patch of ice.
On that European tour, we had a really bad bus.
Metallica's tour bus is barreling through icy back roads after a massive show. But the bus allegedly hits a patch of black ice in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, and it flips on its head.
It's the sound of screeching brakes and being flipped around like a piece of clothes in a dryer.
And 24-year-old bassist Cliff Burton is violently thrown out of his bunk and crushed underneath. One minute they were rock gods on tour. The next they were scraping a brother off the asphalt. James Hetfield's reaction wasn't quiet grief. It was fury. He immediately started accusing the driver.
What happened? What's going on? Is this guy drunk or la la la? Oh, we hit some black ice. And I recall in my underwear, and socks, walking for miles, looking for this black ice, walking back on. Where's this black ice? I don't see any black ice. And I wanted to kill this guy. I was gonna end him there.
Cliff's death hit him hard. It pulled him back to a darker place, one filled with loss, isolation, and anger he thought he'd buried years ago. So, how did him and the rest of Metallica deal with losing Cliff? Well, they just didn't. They got wasted. The band already had a reputation for drinking too much, but after the crash, it went nuclear. Hetfield especially was drinking like he had something to kill inside. But instead of slowing down or taking time to grieve, Metallica hired a new bassist and kept the tour rolling. Jason Newsted barely had time to breathe before he was shoved on stage. It was a wild decision, but it shows how they handled loss. Keep moving, keep playing, and drink until you feel numb.
The only thing we had to do at the time was just battle on. We'd always been about fighting against everything that came our way and stuff like that.
And that really sucks.
James Hetfield did what most tough guys do. He pushed it down, didn't cry, didn't talk, just played louder and drank harder.
For me, haven't been really good at long-term goals. And long-term happiness was always pretty foreign to me. I'm going to be happy right now. I want it now because I feel like shit. And, the drink, the chick, the whatever was always a quick fix.
The 80s became one long blackout of killer riffs and self-destruction. Then came And Justice for All. And by 1991, the Black Album turned these metal outcasts into household names. Grammys, MTV, sold-out arenas, Metallica was everywhere. But behind the scenes, Hetfield was drowning in whiskey and silence.
I think no secret that the James Hetfield on stage is what I would like to be, but I'm not. I'm not that all the time.
What started as part of the band's hard partying image became something darker. By the early 90s, James was drinking heavily just to wind down after shows, often finishing a bottle of vodka alone.
Even though I just want to keep running and let the band just keep going and, run away from problems. It's really difficult when there's so much stuff going on around you and the rest of your life to take time for yourself, to get yourself to a point where you feel like you're functioning. And for me, it has been easy at times to just shut out the rest of the world.
Then came the night Hetfield literally lit himself on fire. During a co-headlining stadium tour with Guns N' Roses in August 1992, Metallica took the stage in Montreal in front of a huge crowd. James was ripping into the song Fade to Black when a technician set off a massive stage pyrotechnic at the wrong time. And boom, a fireball swallows Hetfield mid-song.
Things started going wrong about halfway through Metallica's set when a stage prop exploded, inflicting second-degree burns on James Hetfield's arms and legs. The band was forced to terminate its set, promising the crowd it would return to play a makeup show, and Hetfield was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment.
There was an incident with the pyrotechnics. Unfortunately, James is on his way to the hospital right now, and we're very sorry, but we can't continue the concert for you guys tonight. But we promise you one thing.
He was rushed to the hospital with second and third-degree burns. Miraculously, his injuries, as painful as they were, weren't life-threatening, thanks in part to his guitar taking some of the heat.
Death is not a new subject for us. But the way we're writing about it now, or the way I'm perceiving it, is the positive side, maybe, of death, or maybe death is not the end. Getting close to death does things to people.
And in true Hetfield fashion, he rejoined the tour just over 2 weeks later, arm in a sling, singing on stage, even though he couldn't play guitar until he'd healed. The guy's pain tolerance, both physical and emotional, was off the charts, but these insane moments were adding up, and the cracks in Hetfield's armor were widening. In '97, he got married and tried to be a family man, but he didn't know how to be a normal dad when he'd just spent months on the road drinking like a lunatic. He'd come home wired, angry, still in tour mode. The stage version of James wasn't built for quiet dinners and diaper changes.
I was bringing some of the road life home, and now I had a family and children, and it certainly wasn't a good combination.
The band's image was shifting too. The Load album, released just a year earlier, saw Metallica cut their hair and experiment with bluesy rock, which Hetfield later admitted made him uncomfortable despite going along with it. He was a traditionalist at heart, and suddenly his band was wearing eyeliner in promo photos. Fights with Lars became routine. Two egos clashing over who ran the ship. The booze got heavier, the fuse got shorter. James grew more bitter and angry.
I mean, we're in shit moods and we're not going to get anything.
All you want to do is pick a fucking fight, and
I don't want to pick a fight.
This is so silly. You're just sitting there going, I'm in a really pissy mood, and
I fucking told you straight up that I was.
Right.
And what are you trying to do?
I'm not trying to do fucking shit.
Metallica might have been printing money and selling out stadiums, but they were slowly rotting from the inside. In 2001, Metallica hit a wall. They were in the studio trying to make a new album, what would eventually become Saint Anger. but they treated each other like shit. Out of nowhere, bassist Jason Newsted walked away after 14 years with the band. No public drama, no press meltdown, just personal reasons. But the message was obvious. Something inside the band was broken.
He fucking left the band!
Truth is, Newsted felt creatively suffocated. He wanted to branch out, experiment, play something that didn't have Metallica stamped all over it. But Hetfield shut that down fast. To him, anything outside the band was betrayal. So Jason said, screw it, and walked out the door. Metallica, the biggest metal band on earth, was dying. So they did the unthinkable and went to group therapy. Real therapy, with a licensed professional, sitting in a circle, talking about their feelings. That mess was captured in Some Kind of Monster, a documentary so raw it should have come with a trigger warning.
Obviously, Some Kind of Monster has shown a different side to Metallica. And I think that is stronger. You know, exposing your weaknesses is a pretty strong move.
I'd like to. This is what bugs me about this process, is that every single thought has to be dissected, every emotion. What were you feeling in that instant? I don't know. Right now, it fucking annoys me. Okay?
The documentary revealed just how dysfunctional things had become. Hetfield would show up late or not at all to the studio, then clash with Lars and Kirk over creative control. He was miserable and often drunk. And then, in July of the same year, Hetfield vanished from the public eye. Metallica dropped the bomb. He was in rehab for booze and God knows what else. Fans lost their minds. Their metal icon had cracked. But the truth is that this was way overdue.
Metallica frontman James Hetfield has entered a rehabilitation facility to undergo treatment for alcoholism and other undisclosed addictions. In a statement,
his wife had booted him from the house. That was his rock bottom and scared the hell out of him. So he stopped pretending to be invincible and begged for help.
Alcohol was, ever since my mother died, that became more of a part of me. Alcohol at age 16. It became, it starts off as the cliche, hey, I feel more alive, I feel looser, I feel more comfortable, I can talk to women, I can, get on stage and all of this. It was kind of the fog. I was already in somewhat of a fog, and that helped it be more fun. And then the typical story of starting to need it. And then it became just like this maintenance. And it was a constant fog, and a lot of things I can't remember. Blackout drinking was not good. Getting in fights, all kinds of, a trail of destruction, the cliche of that.
Rehab ripped Hetfield apart. 7 brutal weeks in a facility, then months of therapy. He had to drag out all the crap he'd buried for decades. Childhood trauma, guilt, anger, and actually deal with it. No booze to numb it, no tours to run from it, just raw reality. James Hetfield's stint in rehab marked the end of Alcoholica. When he emerged, he was sober, humbled, and shaky but determined. He apologized to his bandmates, mended bridges with his wife and kids, and essentially had to relearn how to be James the person, not just Hetfield the raging frontman.
But yeah, there's always a soft side to everyone. pretending that there isn't is a problem. And I think that's where I was. Not wanting to be vulnerable ever again after being hurt so many times. Or, you know, I'll always leave the girlfriend because I was hurt once, or, you know, that kind of feel.
I could try Battery. Battery? You can play that fast?
In February 2003, as Saint Anger was nearing completion, Metallica hired Robert Trujillo as their new bassist. And then in June of the same year, Saint Anger finally dropped. It was chaotic, flawed, and real, just like the band that made it. It reflected exactly where Hetfield was at. In one song, he roars, "My lifestyle determines my death style," which pretty much summed up the crossroads he faced. Against all expectations, James Hetfield clawed his way back. In the years following rehab, he stayed sober and threw himself into being a present family man and a better bandmate. Metallica, rejuvenated with Trujillo on bass, hit the studio and the stage with renewed purpose. They released Death Magnetic in 2008, a true return to their thrash roots, and it topped the charts in over 30 countries. The band was back, and Hetfield was front and center, looking strong and healthy. He had traded in the beer gut and bloated face of the late 90s for a lean, tattooed, practically glowing countenance of a man in control of himself. The next decade saw Metallica cement their status as living legends. World tours, inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even playing a gig on all 7 continents, including a concert in Antarctica in 2013, playing for a bunch of penguins and scientists. Through it all, Hetfield maintained his sobriety and kept his head on straight. He became an outspoken advocate for getting help, openly discussing his struggles with fans and in interviews.
Where do you live these days?
I live in Vail, Colorado.
Oh, no shit, man.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
It's very cool. It's quiet, no friggin' traffic, and especially now, super quiet. Snow does something to calm you down a little bit.
I agree with that. I remember when I was a kid in Boston.
One could sense a new maturity and humility in him.
Well, I like, you know, there's a lone wolf part of me that I maybe you can relate to, but I like being by myself. But I also I need people to connect with as well. But when I get out, you know, living in Vail, moving from California to Colorado was a great thing for me. I feel really, I feel a part of nature there. And you don't want to be inside there. There's something about it. You just want to be outside all the time.
Well, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to Colorado this week.
By his 50s, James Hetfield had evolved from a self-destructive madman into something of an elder statesman of metal. He was the guy younger musicians looked up to, marveling at how he survived his own insanity. Of course, real life isn't a tidy Hollywood redemption story, and Hetfield faced setbacks even after cleaning up. The biggest test came in 2019, when after 15 years of sobriety, he suffered a relapse and checked back into rehab. The news drew an outpouring of support. Here was James being brutally honest once again. Addiction doesn't magically disappear, and even rock icons have moments of weakness. Hetfield's willingness to confront his demons in public became an inspiration to many. Metallica canceled an upcoming tour in Australia so Hetfield could focus on getting well. That's a testament to how much things had changed since the old days. Now the band put health before money and brotherhood before business. James emerged from this second rehab stint Determined and humble, thanking fans for their understanding. He admitted that he would always be recovering one day at a time. In a vulnerable way, this only made him more relatable. By 2021, he was back on stage with Metallica, celebrating the 40th anniversary of the band, something almost unthinkable back in the booze-soaked 80s. In 2023, Hetfield and Company released 72 Seasons, a thunderous album themed around the idea that your first 18 years, 72 seasons, shape who you are. The concept came straight from Hetfield's soul, reflecting on how his own childhood trauma and anger forged his identity, for better and worse. At nearly 60 years old, James's life has been a hell of a journey. He went from that shy, wounded kid in Downey to the swaggering metal god lighting up arenas and nearly lost himself along the way. He's stared down death, whether in a bus wreck or a burst of flame, and he's battled the bottle and won one day at a time. Hetfield's story is proof you can face your darkness, own your flaws, and still set the stage on fire.